Have you ever wondered why Draco Malfoy hated Harry Potter so much? What if his hatred wasn't just petty jealousy, but something much deeper? In today's video, you'll discover the real reasons behind their legendary rivalry. Throughout the entire series, Harry Potter is portrayed as the ultimate hero. That makes sense. After all, the early books were meant for children, and a complex, morally ambiguous protagonist wouldn't have fit the tone. Draco, on the other hand, became the perfect antagonist. Arrogant, cruel, and cowardly, he seemed to exist purely to make Harry's life miserable. Tom Felton's brilliant performance only solidified this image. But was Draco really just a spoiled bully? Or was there more to his animosity toward Harry? The truth is, Draco had every reason to resent him. A childhood shaped by bloodlines. To understand Draco's hatred, we need to look at where he came from. He was the only son of Lucius Malfoy, a wealthy, pure-blood wizard who once served Lord Voldemort. His mother, Narcissa Black, came from an equally prestigious magical family. From childhood, Draco was taught that he was special, superior to Muggle-borns and those with lesser heritage. With no siblings to challenge him and parents who reinforced his pride, Draco grew up believing he was destined for greatness. By the time he arrived at Hogwarts, he was already entitled, arrogant, and used to getting his way. But was that enough to make him despise Harry Potter? Probably not. After all, Draco had his own circle of friends. His true resentment came from something far more personal: the first betrayal. Before he even set foot in Hogwarts, Draco had already heard of the boy who lived. His parents speculated that Harry would grow up to be an even greater dark wizard than Voldemort himself. They were eager to see what kind of ally or rival he might become. Draco's first encounter with Harry was in Diagon Alley. Not knowing who he was speaking to, he treated him politely, even trying to befriend him later on the Hogwarts Express. He reached out first, offering his hand and an alliance. Harry's response: public rejection. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a humiliation. Harry chose Ron Weasley over him, laughed at Draco's words, and made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with the Malfoys. For Draco, who had been raised to believe in status and legacy, this was a crushing blow. It was the beginning of their rivalry and a wound that never quite healed. A lifetime of unfairness. As if the rejection wasn't enough, Hogwarts quickly became a nightmare for Draco in one particular way. No matter what he did, Harry always stole the spotlight. Draco was smarter, more disciplined, and more skilled in many areas. Yet despite his efforts, Harry always received praise, attention, and admiration. Not because he worked harder, but because he was famous. Professors, except for Snape, favored Harry. Students idolized him. Even when Draco outperformed him in academics or Quidditch, it never seemed to matter. For a boy raised to believe in prestige and superiority, this was unbearable. The frustration built up, feeding into his resentment. A life defined by expectation. Unlike Harry, who had the freedom to choose his own path, Draco was bound by family expectations. He didn't just dislike Harry, he feared him, because if Harry won, that meant the Malfoy legacy was crumbling. His father expected him to uphold their bloodline's reputation. His mother pressured him to be the perfect son. His entire world revolved around pleasing his family and living up to their ideals. So when Voldemort returned, Draco wasn't just fighting for his own beliefs, he was fighting to survive. Unlike Harry, he never had the choice to be a hero. The redemption that almost was. For all his cruelty, Draco wasn't heartless. Despite years of rivalry, he hesitated when given the chance to expose Harry to Bellatrix Lestrange. He wasn't as ruthless as his father had wanted him to be. And in the end, he rejected Voldemort's cause entirely. I'm not saying Draco was secretly a good person, or that Harry was the villain, But if you take a step back, it's clear Draco had plenty of reasons to hate Harry. And in his position, many others would have felt the same. Draco's hatred wasn't just about personal rivalry, it was about survival. His entire world revolved around the Malfoy name, and Harry Potter threatened everything his family stood for. From the moment he stepped into Hogwarts, Harry unknowingly became Draco's worst nightmare, a symbol of change, rebellion, and everything that put the old wizarding order at risk. Growing up, Draco had been conditioned to see himself as part of an elite class. His father had told him stories of powerful wizards shaping the world, and the Malfoys were always among them. Blood status wasn't just a belief in his household, it was law. Then, out of nowhere, came Harry Potter, a boy who should have fit right into that vision. A legend before he could even talk, a child raised by muggles who had no understanding of the world that should have been his. That contradiction was maddening to Draco. At first, he might have seen an opportunity. Harry was famous, influential, someone who could have been an ally, maybe even a friend. Draco's offer of friendship wasn't just about arrogance, it was a carefully calculated move. Had Harry accepted, Draco's life would have been easier. Instead, he was publicly rejected, left looking foolish in front of the other students, especially in front of Ron Weasley, a blood traitor. That moment marked the first real crack in his pride. As the years passed, that resentment deepened. Hogwarts was supposed to be a place where Draco thrived. He had the wealth, the connections, and the skills. Yet time and time again, Harry took the spotlight. He became the youngest seeker in a century. He was constantly in the middle of grand adventures. He defied professors, broke rules, and somehow, instead of facing consequences, he was celebrated for it. Teachers turned a blind eye to his mischief, and Dumbledore himself seemed to favor him at every turn. For Draco, this was unbearable. No matter how hard he worked, how well he performed in class, none of it seemed to matter. His family name should have commanded respect, but in Hogwarts, it was Harry who had the influence. Even his best insults and schemes never seemed to faze Potter. Every confrontation ended with Harry winning. Every competition, every battle of wits always tipped in his favor. It was infuriating. But behind that fury was something deeper. Fear. Draco had been raised to believe the world followed a certain order. Pure blood wizards ruled. Families like his dictated the future. But Harry was proof that everything could change. A half-blood, raised by muggles, being hailed as the chosen one. That was a direct challenge to everything Draco had been taught. It wasn't just about schoolyard rivalries, it was about his own identity. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. Voldemort returned. Until then, the war had been just a whisper, a distant story. Draco had grown up with his father's tales of the Dark Lord's power, but they had been more myth than reality. Then suddenly, those myths came crashing into his life. Lucius Malfoy, once an untouchable figure, was humiliated. His failure at the Department of Mysteries was a disgrace. The Malfoy name, once a symbol of strength, was tarnished, and Draco, the heir, was expected to fix it. The reality of Voldemort's return was nothing like the stories. It wasn't about honor or power. It was about control and fear. Draco was given a mission. Not because he was trusted, but because he was disposable. Kill Dumbledore or watch his family suffer. That wasn't a choice, that was a death sentence. This was when his hatred toward Harry reached its peak. Not because he truly despised him, but because he needed someone to blame. Harry had everything Draco lacked. Freedom, friends who would die for him, the ability to fight back. Meanwhile, Draco was trapped. His family's influence meant nothing. His own life was no longer in his hands. For the first time, he wasn't the arrogant, sneering bully. He was terrified. The moment in the bathroom with Myrtle changed everything. When Harry confronted him, wand in hand, Draco was completely vulnerable. He wasn't throwing insults or boasting about his family. He was breaking down. His carefully built walls were crumbling, and in that moment, he wasn't the Malfoy heir. He was just a boy, desperate and alone. Snape saved him that night, but it didn't change the fact that Draco had reached the edge. He had always thought himself superior to Harry, yet here he was, helpless. And Potter, the boy he had loathed for years, was the one showing him mercy. The war changed everything. Draco saw firsthand what it meant to be on the losing side. He watched as Voldemort took over his home, as his parents, once so powerful, were reduced to frightened followers. The reality of everything he had believed in became too much to ignore. By the time of the final battle, Draco was no longer the same person who had strutted through Hogwarts mocking Muggle-borns. He had seen what real fear looked like. He had felt what it meant to be powerless. And when the moment came when he could have handed Harry over to Bellatrix, he hesitated. Even after the war ended, the damage was done. Draco would never be the same. He had lost his faith in the ideals he had once clung to. His hatred for Harry faded, not because they ever became friends, but because he finally understood. Harry had never stolen his future. He had never ruined Draco's life. That had all been an illusion, built on years of lies and expectations. In the end, Draco Malfoy wasn't just the school bully. He was a product of a world that was crumbling around him. His hatred for Harry was never just about rivalry. It was fear, jealousy, and the weight